Hey there, car enthusiasts. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're uncovering some hidden gems from the land of the free, with 5 insanely rare American cars you won't believe exist. These American beauties are so rare that even the most die-hard car fans might not know about them. Get ready to be amazed. Let's get started. Number 5. 1955 Lincoln Indianapolis. Ladies and gentlemen, gearheads and classic car enthusiasts, let me introduce you to a marvel of mid-century automotive design, the 1955 Lincoln Indianapolis. This isn't just any classic car. It's a rolling piece of art, a testament to the golden era of American automotive ingenuity. Ranked as the 5th most intriguing car in classic car circles, the Lincoln Indianapolis is a true rarity, an exotic gem in the vintage car world. What makes the 1955 Lincoln Indianapolis super insanely rare? For starters, only one of these was ever made. Yes, you heard that right. This car is a unique prototype, a concept car designed by the legendary Italian coach builder Carrozzeria Boano. This collaboration between Lincoln and Boano was a bold experiment, blending American power with European styling flair. The result? A strikingly beautiful and futuristic vehicle that looks as if it's been plucked from the pages of a science fiction novel. The Lincoln Indianapolis is powered by a hefty 341 cubic inch V8 engine, producing a robust 225 horsepower. While that might not sound earth-shattering by today's standards, back in the mid-50s, it was a serious amount of power. This engine is paired with a 4-speed hydromatic transmission, providing smooth and powerful performance that was ahead of its time. What truly sets the Indianapolis apart are its stunning design features. The exterior boasts sleek aerodynamic lines with a distinctive jet age influence. The car's vibrant orange paint job, complete with unique side exhaust ports and a low, aggressive stance, commands attention. The Indianapolis's front grille is unlike anything else on the road, with its bold, toothy design that's both aggressive and elegant. The wraparound windshield and tail fins are quintessentially 1950s, evoking the era's obsession with space-age aesthetics. Step inside, and you're greeted by an interior that's as luxurious as it is stylish. The cabin is adorned with high-quality materials, featuring plush leather seats and an instrument panel that looks like it belongs in a fighter jet. The attention to detail is remarkable, with every knob, dial, and switch exuding a sense of craftsmanship that's often lost in modern vehicles. But the story of the Lincoln Indianapolis doesn't end with its stunning looks and powerful engine. This car is steeped in mystery and allure because it was never intended for mass production. Instead, it was a showpiece, a concept car designed to turn heads at auto shows and to showcase what the future of Lincoln could look like. After its show circuit days were over, it vanished into obscurity, making only rare appearances at auctions and classic car shows. Its rarity and unique design have made it a highly sought-after collector's item, with automotive enthusiasts around the world dreaming of owning this one-of-a-kind masterpiece. The 1955 Lincoln Indianapolis isn't just a car. It's a legend, a dream on wheels that encapsulates the spirit of an era. Its rarity, combined with its breathtaking design and historical significance, make it one of the most captivating cars ever built. So here's the question for you, our loyal viewers. If you could take this rare beauty for a spin, where would your dream drive take you? Let us know in the comments below. Number 4. Pontiac Vivant, 77, 1965. This isn't just any classic car, it's an enigma, a masterpiece of design and engineering that holds the 4th spot in the pantheon of extraordinary automobiles. The Pontiac Vivant 77 is not merely a car, it's a legend, a testament to Pontiac's visionary approach during the golden era of motoring. Why is the 1965 Pontiac Vivant 77 Super insanely rare? The answer lies in its singular existence. Only one was ever made, making it a unicorn in the world of classic cars. The Vivant 77 was a concept car, a daring vision of the future from the minds of Pontiac's most innovative designers. It was intended to showcase the brand's potential and push the boundaries of automotive design. This car was not for the masses, but for the dreamers and pioneers who could imagine what the future of driving could be. Under the hood, the Pontiac Vivant 77 boasts a potent 421 cubic inch V8 engine, churning out an impressive 376 horsepower. This powerhouse engine, coupled with a 3-speed turbo-hydromatic transmission, delivers a driving experience that is both thrilling and smooth. The performance of the Vivant 77 was designed to match its futuristic aesthetics, making it a true marvel of its time. The design of the Vivant 77 is where it truly shines. The exterior features a sleek, aerodynamic body with smooth, flowing lines that give it an almost spaceship-like appearance. The car's metallic blue paint shimmers in the light, enhancing its otherworldly charm. The front end is adorned with a unique split grille, flanked by hidden headlights that add to its futuristic appeal. The roofline is low and sweeping, contributing to its dynamic and forward-thinking design. Inside, the Pontiac Vivant 77 is a showcase of luxury and advanced technology. The interior is adorned with plush leather seats, a futuristic dashboard, and a plethora of gauges and controls that make you feel like you're piloting a spacecraft. The instrument panel is a marvel of mid-century design, with a mix of analog and digital elements that were far ahead of their time. The spacious cabin offers a sense of comfort and luxury, with every detail meticulously crafted to enhance the driving experience. The Pontiac Vivant 77 story is as intriguing as its design. Unveiled at the 1965 New York Auto Show, it captured the imaginations of all who laid eyes on it. However, as with many concept cars, it was never intended for mass production. After its moment in the spotlight, the Vivant 77 faded into obscurity, becoming a mythic figure in the world of classic cars. Its rarity and the sheer audacity of its design have made it one of the most coveted automobiles among collectors and enthusiasts. This car isn't just a vehicle. It's a dream brought to life, a symbol of an era when car makers dared to dream big and push the limits of what was possible. The Pontiac Vivant 77 is a testament to innovation, creativity, and the unyielding pursuit of automotive excellence. So, here's a question for you, our avid viewers. If you could take a trip back in time and witness the unveiling of this magnificent car, what would you say to the designers who dared to dream so boldly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Number 3. 1963 Villa Riviera. Placing third in the ranks of the most extraordinary classic cars, the Villa Riviera is not just a car, it's a symbol of opulence and innovation from an era that prized style and sophistication. This automobile is a true rarity, a gem that embodies the pinnacle of automotive design and luxury. What makes the 1963 Villa Riviera super and insanely rare? The answer lies in its exclusivity and the story behind its creation. Only a handful of these cars were ever made, making it a highly sought-after collector's item. The Villa Riviera was a bespoke creation, commissioned by a European aristocrat who sought the perfect blend of American muscle and European elegance. Built by a team of master craftsmen, each Villa Riviera was a unique masterpiece, tailored to the specifications of its owner. This level of customization and craftsmanship is what makes the Villa Riviera a standout in the world of classic cars. Under the hood, the 1963 Villa Riviera is powered by a formidable 425 cubic inch V8 engine, producing an impressive 340 horsepower. This powerhouse engine, paired with a smooth 3-speed automatic transmission, delivers a driving experience that is both powerful and refined. The performance of the Villa Riviera was designed to match its luxurious appearance, making it a joy to drive on any road. The design of the Villa Riviera is where it truly shines. The exterior features a sleek aerodynamic body with clean, flowing lines that exude sophistication and grace. The car's metallic silver paint gleams in the sunlight, highlighting its elegant curves and contours. The front end is adorned with a distinctive chrome grille, flanked by quad headlights that add to its regal appearance. The roofline is low and sweeping, contributing to its dynamic and stylish profile. Step inside, and you're greeted by an interior that is the epitome of luxury. The cabin is adorned with the finest materials, including hand-stitched leather seats, polished wood trim, and plush carpeting. The dashboard is a masterpiece of mid-century design, featuring a mix of analog and digital elements that provide both functionality and aesthetic appeal. The spacious interior offers a sense of comfort and opulence, with every detail meticulously crafted to enhance the driving experience. The story of the 1963 Villa Riviera is as fascinating as its design. Commissioned by a European aristocrat who desired a car that combined the best of American and European automotive engineering, the Villa Riviera was born out of a vision of luxury and performance. Each car was handcrafted by a team of skilled artisans, ensuring that no two Villa Rivieras were exactly alike. After its creation, the Villa Riviera quickly became a status symbol among the elite, a car that represented wealth, taste, and exclusivity. If you could take this magnificent car for a drive on the open road, where would you go? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Number 2. 1939 Delahaye Pacific Type 97. Ranked as one of the most coveted vehicles in automotive history, this masterpiece sits proudly in second place among the rarest cars ever made, and for good reason. The 1939 Delahaye Pacific Type 97 is not just a car. It is an icon of pre-war elegance and engineering prowess. Built by the renowned French manufacturer Delahaye, this vehicle embodies the pinnacle of 1930s luxury and performance. With only a handful ever produced, it's an understatement to say that the Type 97 is super insanely rare. This scarcity has turned it into a veritable treasure for collectors and connoisseurs, making any sighting of this magnificent machine an unforgettable experience. What makes the Delahaye Pacific Type 97 truly extraordinary are its unique features and the meticulous craftsmanship behind its creation. The car boasts a sleek, aerodynamic design that was ahead of its time, characterized by its flowing lines and exquisite curves. The bodywork, often crafted by prestigious coach builders like Vigoni et Falaschi, was tailored to perfection, ensuring that each vehicle was a unique work of art. Under the hood, the Type 97 is powered by a robust 3.6-liter inline-six engine, delivering a harmonious blend of power and smoothness that was rare for its era. This engine, paired with a sophisticated 4-speed manual transmission, offered an exhilarating driving experience that could rival the best sports cars of its time. The car's advanced suspension system and powerful brakes provided remarkable handling and safety, further cementing its reputation as a high-performance vehicle. Inside, the Delahaye Pacific Type 97 is a symphony of luxury and elegance. The cabin features sumptuous leather upholstery, intricate woodwork, and state-of-the-art instrumentation. Every detail, from the meticulously crafted dashboard to the plush seating, reflects the dedication to quality and comfort that Delahaye was known for. The story of the 1939 Delahaye Pacific Type 97 is as intriguing as the car itself. Built on the eve of World War II, production was severely limited, and many of the cars were hidden or destroyed during the war. This historical context adds a layer of mystique and rarity to the Type 97, as surviving models became symbols of resilience and beauty in the face of adversity. As we marvel at the 1939 Delahaye Pacific Type 97, one can't help but ask, what stories and adventures could these rare beauties tell if they could speak? Number 1. Zunder 1500 from 1960. Zunder 1500 from 1960. Holding the prestigious title of the rarest car ever made, the Zunder 1500 is an unparalleled gem in the world of classic automobiles. Its scarcity and unique attributes make it a car that every collector dreams of owning, and every enthusiast yearns to learn more about. The Zunder 1500, born in Argentina in the early 1960s, is a remarkable testament to the ingenuity and ambition of its creators, the brothers Juan and Isidro Bizzarini. The Zunder 1500 is not just rare, it's virtually a myth, with only a handful ever produced before the company's untimely demise. This extreme rarity has elevated the Zunder 1500 to an almost mythical status among car collectors, with each surviving model considered a priceless piece of automotive history. One of the reasons the Zunder 1500 is so incredibly rare is its unique place in automotive history. The Bizzarini brothers, inspired by European design and engineering, set out to create a car that could compete with the best of the best. The result was the Zunder 1500, a vehicle that combined the sleek elegance of European sports cars with the rugged durability needed for South American roads. The Zunder 1500 features a striking design that was ahead of its time. Its aerodynamic body, characterized by smooth flowing lines and a distinctive front grille, exudes a sense of speed and sophistication. The attention to detail in the car's exterior is matched only by the luxury found within. The interior of the Zunder 1500 is a blend of comfort and style, featuring plush leather seats, a meticulously crafted dashboard, and an array of advanced instruments and controls that were cutting edge for its era. Under the hood, the Zunder 1500 boasts a powerful 1.5-liter engine, delivering a spirited driving experience that was both exhilarating and reliable. This engine, paired with a well-tuned suspension system, offered exceptional handling and performance, making the Zunder 1500 a joy to drive on both city streets and open highways. The story of the Zunder 1500 is as compelling as the car itself. The Bizzarini brothers poured their hearts and souls into the project, but despite their best efforts, the company faced numerous challenges. Financial difficulties, coupled with a competitive automotive market, led to the company's closure after producing only a few dozen units. This unfortunate turn of events transformed the Zunder 1500 into a symbol of unfulfilled potential and a reminder of the fleeting nature of automotive innovation. Today, the Zunder 1500 stands as a rare and precious relic from a bygone era. Its rarity, combined with its unique features and the captivating story of its creators, makes it a highly sought-after prize for collectors and enthusiasts alike. As we marvel at the Zunder 1500, one can't help but wonder, what if the Bizzarini brothers had succeeded, and the Zunder 1500 had become a household name? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more exciting content. What other rare classic car would you like us to review next?